In 1995, three rappers from Yonkers signed to Bad Boy Records. The deal looked perfect. They work with Puff Daddy, the hottest producer in hip-hop. They be on the same label as Biggie. They finally get out of the streets and make real money. Jadakiss, Styles P, and Sheek Louch, known as the LOX, thought they'd made it. Then they read the contract. Diddy owned their masters. He owned their publishing. He controlled what music they could make. And when they tried to leave, he refused to let them go. It took 3 years of public protests and help from one of the biggest rappers in the world to finally get free. By the time they escaped, they learned the hardest lesson in the music business. Read your contract before you sign it. This is the story of how the LOX got trapped by Bad Boy Records and had to fight their way out. The LOX started in Yonkers, New York in the early 1990s. Jason Phillips, who became Jadakiss, grew up with David Styles, who became Styles P. They met Sheek Louch in high school. All three grew up rough. They sold drugs, they saw violence, they wanted out. Rap was their way out. They started as a group called the Bomb Squad, then changed their name to the Warlocks, which got shortened to the LOX. They performed at local shows, they battled other rappers, they built a reputation in New York's underground scene. In 1994, they met Mary J. Blige. She heard them freestyle and was impressed. She brought them to perform at one of our shows. That's where they met Puff Daddy, who was producing Mary's music at the time. Diddy, also known as Diddy, ran Bad Boy Records. In 1994 and 1995, Bad Boy was the biggest hip-hop label in the world. They had Biggie Smalls, they had Faith Evans, they had Craig Mack. Every artist on Bad Boy was successful. Diddy saw potential in the LOX. He offered them a deal. Sign the Bad Boy and he'd make them stars. They were in their early 20s. They had no lawyers, they had no managers, they had no idea how the music industry worked. They just knew this was their shot. They signed the contract without really reading it. At first, everything seemed great. In 1995, the LOX started writing for other Bad Boy artists. They wrote hooks, they wrote verses. They became Diddy's go-to writers when he needed street credibility on the track. They wrote for Biggie. They appeared on his album Life After Death in 1997. They wrote for Puff Daddy's debut album No Way Out, which came out in 1997 and sold over 7 million copies. Their big break came in 1997 with a song called We'll Always Love Big Papa. The song was a tribute to Biggie after he was murdered in March 1997. The LOX appeared on it alongside Puff Daddy and Faith Evans. The song helped introduce them to a national audience. Then, in 1998, the LOX released their debut album, Money, Power, and Respect, on Bad Boy Records. The title track became a hit. It went to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album went platinum, selling over 1 million copies. They were finally making money. They were on tour. They were on TV. They were famous. But behind the scenes, something was wrong. The LOX started looking at their money. They sold 1 million albums. They written for Biggie and Puff. They'd appeared on multiple platinum records. But they weren't seeing the money they expected. They went back and actually read their contract. That's when they understood what they'd signed. Bad Boy Records owned their masters. This meant Diddy owned the recordings of their music. The LOX couldn't control how their songs were used. They couldn't sell their music independently. They couldn't even re-release their old songs on another label. Bad Boy also owned a significant portion of their publishing. Publishing is where most of the money comes from in music, from radio play, from samples, from licensing. The LOX were only getting a small percentage of their own publishing money. The contract also controlled what kind of music they could make. Bad Boy wanted them to make commercial, radio-friendly hip-hop. But the LOX were street rappers. They wanted to make harder, grittier music. Diddy kept pushing them to do more pop-sounding songs. He wanted them on tracks with R&B singers. He wanted them to make music for the clubs and the radio. The LOX wanted to make music for the streets. In 1999, The LOX decided they wanted out of Bad Boy Records. They went to Diddy and asked to be released from their contract. They said they appreciated everything he'd done for them, but they wanted to move in a different direction. Diddy said no. He owned their contract. They signed for multiple albums. He wasn't letting them go until they fulfilled their obligations. The LOX was stuck. They couldn't make music anywhere else. They couldn't buy their way out. They didn't have enough money. Diddy controlled their entire career. So they did something radical. They went public. In 1999, the LOX started protesting outside Bad Boy's offices in New York. They brought fans with them. They held signs. They did radio interviews explaining their situation. They said Diddy was holding them hostage. They said Bad Boy was preventing them from making the music they wanted to make. They said they signed a bad deal when they were young and didn't know better. The hip-hop community paid attention. Other artists started speaking out about Bad Boy's contracts. People started questioning whether Diddy was exploiting his artists. But Diddy still wouldn't let him go. Jay-Z was watching all of this happen. Jay-Z ran Rockefeller Records with Damon Dash. Rockefeller was Bad Boy's biggest competitor at the time. Jay-Z wanted the LOX on his label. More importantly, Jay-Z understood what was happening. He'd been in the industry longer than the LOX. He knew how bad contracts worked. He knew artists got trapped. Jay-Z reached out to the LOX. He said if they could get out of their Bad Boy contract, he'd sign them to Rockefeller. He'd give them creative freedom. He'd give them a better deal. This gave the LOX leverage. Now they had somewhere to go. Now they had support from one of the biggest rappers in the game. The protests got bigger. The media coverage increased. Bad Boy started looking bad in the press. People were calling Diddy exploitative. They were saying he was no different from the old record executives who'd stolen from black artists for decades. Finally, in 2000, Diddy agreed to let the LOX go. But there was a catch. Diddy didn't just release the LOX for free. He made them pay. First, Bad Boy kept the masters to all the music the LOX recorded while signed to the label. This meant their debut album, Money, Power, and Respect, and all their guest appearances on Bad Boy releases still belonged to Diddy. The LOX would never own that music. Second, Bad Boy kept a portion of their publishing forever. Even songs the LOX would record on other labels, Bad Boy would get a percentage of the publishing money. Third, the LOX had to agree never to speak negatively about Bad Boy or Diddy in public. This was written into the release agreement. The LOX agreed to all of it. They just wanted out. In 2000, the LOX signed to Rockefeller Records. Jay-Z gave them the creative freedom they wanted. They released their second album, We Are the Streets, in 2000, and it was much grittier, more street-oriented than their Bad Boy music. The album didn't sell as well as their debut. It sold around 250,000 copies. Still good, but not platinum. But the LOX didn't care. They were making the music they wanted to make. The LOX's story became a cautionary tale in hip-hop. Other young artists watched what happened. They learned to read their contracts. They learned to hire lawyers before signing anything. They learned that a bad contract could trap you for years. The LOX themselves became advocates. In interviews throughout the 2000s and 2010s, they talked openly about their Bad Boy experience. They warned young rappers not to make the same mistakes they did. Jadakiss said in multiple interviews that he should have had a lawyer read the Bad Boy contract before signing it. He said he was young and excited and didn't think about the long-term consequences. Styles P said the experience taught him that the music industry is a business first and art second. He said you have to protect yourself because nobody else will. The Bad Boy situation also raised bigger questions about the industry. If Diddy, a black man who'd experienced the industry himself as an artist and producer, was taking advantage of young black artists, what did that say about the system? Diddy never apologized. In interviews, he said the LOX signed the contract and he held them to it. He said that's how business works. He said he gave them opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. Both things can be true. Diddy did help the LOX career. Without Bad Boy, they might never have got national exposure. But he also locked them into a deal that heavily favored him. In 1995, the LOX signed to Bad Boy Records because they wanted fame and money. They thought Diddy was going to make them stars. He did make them stars, but he also owned them. It took 3 years of fighting to get out. By the time they left Bad Boy, they lost their masters. They lost most of their publishing. They'd given up any chance of owning their early music. But they gained something important. They freedom. The LOX went on to have long careers. They've released multiple albums. They've done successful tours. They've maintained respect in hip-hop for over 25 years. But they never forgot what happened at Bad Boy. And they made sure other artists didn't forget either. The music industry has changed since the 1990s. Artists have more options now. Independent releases are easier. Streaming has changed how money flows, but the fundamental lesson from the LOX's story remains the same. Read your contract, hire a lawyer, understand what you're signing, because once you sign, it's too late.